5 deal killers to avoid when selling a company or securing capital. If you stick around to the end of this video, we'll say one tip that we like to emphasize and incorporate into all of our processes to try to avoid all of these pain points. So we've talked in many videos about the many different ways to optimize, to maximize the probability of reaching a good outcome. Sometimes it's equally as useful to look at what things will kill a deal, what things will actually stop a process in its tracks and materially lower the probability of getting to where you want to get to. And by avoiding these things, you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls that we've historically seen in other people's processes. So the first deal killers are the numbers don't line up. And so think about it. When you're communicating a business, a key component of that narrative is the fundamental profitability of the business. What are the revenues? What are the operating expenses? What's the gross margin? Et cetera, et cetera. And those numbers need to line up. So whatever's communicated initially to a company needs to largely, if not exactly, line up with the ultimate financials that they're going to see. Seems obvious, doesn't happen as often as you'd think, and so we always make sure from the front end of a process that the numbers are going to line up. The second is the narrative needs to highlight the right points, and so sometimes, yes, the fundamentals of the business, revenue, operating expenses, profitability is important. However, equally as important are what is the end customer basis, what is the access that a company has, and then also, and equally as important, what are the capabilities, what's the aptitude, what are the proprietary capacities of a business. And so by highlighting the totality of the narrative, you optimize the outcomes. And by virtue of not doing that, or only focusing on one of these things and not giving a well-rounded comprehensive, it oftentimes will kill a deal. That's why important. The narrative needs to be complete yet succinct, and that's a balance that's tricky, but one that is important. The next is that something is too slow or lost momentum. So transactions have a cadence to them, have a momentum to them, and as that momentum builds, the probability of getting to a better outcome grows as well. But likewise, if something starts and stops, fits and starts, if it gets going and then stops, people on the other side of the table have lots of other things that they're looking at as well. And so if you have someone locked in, if there is a company, a firm, etc., that's focused on trying to get a transaction done with you, one of the worst things you can do is to kill that momentum. And so it's important to keep the ball moving, keep things rolling forward. Plan a meeting from a meeting, have the next step laid out, don't lose momentum. The fourth deal killer to avoid is dealing with the wrong people. You might have the right narrative, the numbers might line up perfectly, you are keeping the right momentum, but if you're communicating to the wrong party, it could all be for naught. So this goes back to some of our older videos. We'll put a thumbnail here relative to how to verify the veracity or prioritize a prospective acquirer, capital provider, and that's important so that all of the right things have to be done, yet if it's done with the wrong party, it still doesn't get you where you want to be, and that can kill a deal. So important to make sure you're always talking to the right people. And the last element is having the proper team with you. And so again, this kind of dovetails into the momentum element of it, is you don't want to get too far down the track without having the right members assembled. There's the right cadence, the right parts of the process when you want to bring some of these people in. However, from our perspective, we always want to be from end to end with our clients, so representing them as their M&A advisor or their capital sourcing advisor for a transaction. We want to have a CPA on hand, that way they can answer questions in a ready fashion throughout the conversations in the process. And then we want to have the right attorney on hand as well, not necessarily for the front end of the process, but certainly from the letter of intent onward through diligence. So different parties come in at different times. We like to choreograph that and kind of cadence it in a way that I think optimizes efficiency from a spend and resource perspective, as well as from an efficacy perspective, or getting to the ultimate conclusion. But having the right team is important, and not having the right team will be a deal killer. So to summarize the 5 deal killers to avoid here: numbers that don't line up, a narrative that's inconclusive, a loss of momentum or too slow of a process, dealing with the wrong people, and not having the right team. Do one or all or any of those 5, and the probability of a good outcome is going to get meaningfully lower. The flip side of that is if you assure that all 5 of these things are taken care of and rock solid from the start, you materially increase the probability of getting a good outcome. And so one tip that we like to implement as we're starting these exercises is have a plan, right? If you can concretely point to exactly the point at which all of these things tie together, exactly how all of these boxes are ticked, then the probability of hitting one of these deal killers is 0, right? And so have a plan. From the very get-go, we sit down with our clients and we say, okay, here's how we're going to make sure the numbers line up. Here's how we're going to make sure the narrative is conclusive. Here's how we're not going to lose momentum. We're going to keep this process on train tracks. Here's how we're going to make sure we're only dealing with bona fide parties. And lastly, here's the team that we're going to put together. Sometimes it's all people from our side. Sometimes it's people that they have in their camp already. We make it as custom tailored as necessary, but that's the tip. Have the plan and you avoid the pitfalls. So that's a thought for today. Hope the week's getting off to a good start for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. See you next time.